this tutorial we're going to explore making buttons in Edge Animate. Now we're going to make some static buttons, but we're also going to make some buttons that are nicely animated. So let's begin. Begin by drawing a rectangle. This will be for our first button. Now I'm not going to choose the kind of ugly color there. I'm going to try and choose a little bit more bold color to choose myself. And I'm going to start off by creating some text that goes across it. Now I stretch it across and give it a button title on there, so not too fancy. And then I'm going to change the color to white so that it's a little bit easier to see, and then I'm going to stretch it across as well. Now I love the fact that this will automatically kind of center your text within your button. Once you've got that, you want to select both of them. You want to right click and choose Convert to Symbol. I'm going to call this Sample1 BTN. Now, inside of this, you need to double click to go inside. And what we're going to do is create a couple little different sections here. One section at the very beginning is a label, and that label is made with Control L. You can also go up to Timeline, Insert Label. And this is going to be, label 1 is going to be what's called up. That's its normal state. Now I'm going to go out to about 500 milliseconds. I'm going to do another Control L, and that's going to be called over. Now I need to create a different look between the up and the over state. So with the blue background selected, I'm going to go ahead and do a keyframe, and I can do a keyframe both just in case, because I really wanted my second one to have a slightly different look. Not that it really matters. So I'm going to go to a purple. So from blue to purple. Now you'll see that it animates here, but we're not going to be actually seeing this animation in our tutorial. Go ahead and save your work now. And I'm going to call this in here, I'm going to make a new folder, and this is going to be called Buttons. It's going to be called Buttons. Alright, now if you start to test with Control Enter, you'll see that as you try and hover over it, you actually get the text and your button automatically animated for you. So we've got to do some things. First thing, we've got to fix that hover state. And the way we do this is a couple different options actually. Go back to the main timeline. One thing we can do, of course, is stop it. But we can apply a cursor, which is a pointer, to the main timeline, and we will get exactly what we want without any problem. And by the way, you can just refresh on the one that you already have tested in the future. I always forget to do that. Just save and go back to your HTML window and refresh it. Alright, so the reason that I don't like this is because I don't like to have to remember to put that on the outside of the object. I like to put it on the inside. And so the way that I do that is by creating what's called an invisible button inside. The way we do this is by creating a rectangle that goes across the entire object, that goes on top, and then we change its opacity to 0. Now, I like to name this object inv_btn, and that means invisible button. I know what it is. Then we'll apply the cursor to that. Now we'll come back to why this invisible button is a little bit more important later on. But now you can go back to your main level. You can save it, go back to your window, and refresh, and you'll see that everything should be working just fine. Now back inside, what we need to do is take a look at these labels. We've got the up and the over, and we need to jump to those labels when we hover over and we hover out or mouse out of this object. So back on the main level, we're going to go to the actions for this object. We're going to do a mouse over, which will do the playback, and we're going to stop at, on the stage, the sample1 button, and then we have to tell it where to stop. Since this is the mouse over, we're going to go to the over section. Now I'm going to copy that, just so I don't have to go through the others. And I'm going to do mouse out, and this time I'm just going to replace that. And this, instead of out, will actually be called up. So now if we test this again, you'll see that we are indeed getting a nice interactive button there. So once again, I can just refresh. Always do Control Enter, just tap it. Okay, so there's a basic simple button. Let's create another one next to it. I'm going to change the color of this to be something obviously different. And I'm going to give it some different text. And wouldn't it be nice if you could use different fonts? So of course there are different fonts here that you can use, but you can also add fonts from your Edge fonts, or even a custom font like linked to a Google font or something like that. So I'm going to use this Acme font, and then I like that you can kind of drag this up and down and get that to be pretty centered. Not perfect with this particular font, but not too bad either. Anyway, now that I've got that object, I'm going to go ahead and select them both, convert to a symbol. This will be my sample 2 button, BTN. Inside there, I want to repeat the same process that I did before. So I could select the background that's there and just duplicate it with Control D, put it on top. Oops. How about I get it on top there? There we go. And I'm going to double click on it and call it inv_btn, and give it a cursor and change its opacity to 0. Now, inside here, what we're going to do is I'm going to jump out to actually only about 250 milliseconds, because I think that I kind of like things to happen kind of quickly when it comes to animations. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and do the animation. I could have done the pick whip here, by the way. If I'd done that, that would have been a smart way of getting a little bit faster animation going on. And that way you can see it's kind of animating both. Now, if you don't like the order, this is going to start off the pink and then go to blue. If you don't like that order, you can just right click and invert that, and you'll see now it's going to go from blue to the kind of pinkish color. So pretty easy to handle. Anyway, I'm going to take off that right there, and might take off the auto keyframe as well. Now, at the end of this, I need it to stop. So I need to have a trigger at the end of that that says playback, stop, and it's just going to stop that timeline. So sym.stop. And what that means is that it's going to get to here and just stop, which is great. Now, I'm going to come back to the main stage, and you'll see that it's playing by default, and I don't want it to play. I want it to be stopped, and I want it to play when I hover over it. So I'm going to go to mouse over, playback, play, stage, and this is the sample 2 button. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to the next one, which is mouse out. And here is where it's a little bit different. Instead of play, I'm actually going to do play reverse. And the reason that you use a play reverse is because this way it'll play forward and then it will reverse when you mouse off of it. It's really kind of clever, but it works great. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, go back and refresh here, and you'll see I can go forward and play it backwards as well. So a little bit of glitchiness there, just a tiny bit, but I won't worry too much about that. Now, the reason that I don't love this code on the outside is this. I like the idea of what's called encapsulation. When I duplicate this button with Control D, and I try and go ahead and use it, what you'll see is that the code is still attached to the name that it was to begin with. So that's kind of annoying. And it means that I would have to go into this button and change everything. So this is now sample 3 button is what I should name this, obviously. So I'll call that sample 3 underscore btn. And then I would have to go into this code and change everything to sample 3 in order to get this to work. So you can see that now has, of course, fixed it. But why do that if I don't have to? So that's where that invisible movie clip button is all about. What I'm going to actually do is remove the actions from these clips. I'm going to remove those completely. Go inside the button, and on the invisible button, I'm going to give those actions. And so here it's going to be on mouse over. We're going to go ahead and just do play. And you'll notice I don't have to go inside the stage to do it. If I wanted to go back to the stage, I could do it and go to a different object, but that's not really what I want. Oh, go ahead and click that, and this is going to be play sample2 underscore btn. And it's just easy, sim.play. And the reason why is because this particular invisible button is on the timeline of that button, so it doesn't have to do anything fancy to be able to target it. Now, with the mouse out, I'm just going to go ahead and do play reverse. Now, I think, yeah. If you are, by the way, if you're typing things in, you have to be very precise about doing it. I've just typed in a couple E's here, and obviously it won't work when I test it. So, I think that's really it, what I wanted to do. I've got the mouse over, I've got the mouse out. And if I test this by saving and going back to here and refreshing, you'll see I get the mouse over and mouse out event on both of these independently because the code is inside the object itself, or the symbol. And I can duplicate these and have more of them that will happen the exact same way. So this is what's called encapsulation, where the code is basically encapsulated within the button itself rather than being on the main timeline. And it's kind of a nice feature because it means that you can separate your coding from kind of like what its action is. Or you can do like the hover effects separately from like what happens when you click on the button, which is kind of cool. All right, so we have an animated button that animates forward. We have a button that's just static, and we have one that animates backwards to be able to create a quick little animation. Now we're going to create a couple more buttons, but we're going to go on to the next tutorial before we do that. So save your work here and go on.